on as much as your hair as the holes in your clothes.
That's the style, boy. That's the
It's
design.
like you're eaten by moths.
Taryn, my sister would say the same thing. Okay, if you're there, say hello. I see someone is there. If you watch the replay, let us know you watch the replay as always. Um, what do you got to say?
They're probably going, that's creepy. How do they know I'm here?
I can see. We can see the number of viewers. We just can't see who it is. Anyway, do you have anything to say?
Does it have to be intelligent?
Not necessarily. If you want to say it.
No.
It's our platform. Say whatever you want.
Yeah. It's better to keep your mouth shut and be thought a fool than open up your mouth and remove all doubt. No, I got nothing. You may as well get started on it.
No, we have a few minutes before it's 3 o'clock, so I don't want to go right into it while people are still signing in.
Oh, you're still jumping in the room. It's a nice day today. We finally see some sunshine. It quit snowing. It was warm-ish. Minus
it's
one.
Nice out, actually.
That warm,
okay, let's talk about the 6-week briefly because it is opening on Monday. So enrollment will open officially on Monday within this community only for the first week. Then it will open to the public general public the week after that. I do have, what did I just tell you? 16 or 17 people already confirmed they have a spot. They put a deposit. So those spots are gone. And then I have, I think, 6, if not 7 or 8 more on the wait list that need to be contacted to, decide if they want to put a deposit down to secure their spot. So let's just say those 7 or 8 people. Hey, Tracy. Hope you had a good run, or you're having a good run. Let's just say those 7 or 8 people do decide to sign on. That would mean then that we are opening up with roughly 25 spots gone. So roughly 50% of the spots would be sold out before we even
depending on the size of the group.
Depending on if I take 40 or if I take 50.
Right.
Let's just say that.
Yes.
So that's where we're at. So if you are interested in the program, I understand this is Easter weekend, so keep that in mind because I'm also going to be kind of in and out of, on and offline. But if you are interested in the program, if you don't know what the program is, if you want to have a discussion about it, if you're curious about it, whatever, there never hurts to have a conversation. Just because you have a conversation with me doesn't mean there's going to be any pressure for you to.
That's right. You're not committing. You're not going, oh, I talked to Melissa. Well, now I have to buy.
Right. So it's just to have the conversation, and then at least you have the information. And if you decide against it, that's fine. If your goals don't match the program that I offer, I will tell you and I will refer you to somebody else.
That's right.
If it does match and, we can't come up with an investment plan that works for you, then at least for future down the road, maybe for the next what?
I was just thinking of something.
Maybe for the next one or the next one after that. So at least it doesn't hurt to have the conversation. What?
As the Mexicans say, it's free to look.
Yeah, exactly. Funny. Okay. Hey, Janine. Okay, so the topic that we decided to talk about today was
plateau.
Have you really plateaued? What was the title again?
Oh no, you've plateaued.
But have you? Right, or have you? And the reason actually we chose this is because I've noticed in a few groups that I'm a part of lately, there have been posts like, ladies, I've stopped, as an example, ladies groups usually. I've stopped losing weight. What do I have to do? Or I've definitely plateaued. What can I do to kickstart my weight loss again, or something like that, along those lines. So, and I do get this question actually quite often from a lot of people, including my clients, who I'll say this. Oftentimes we think we've plateaued and we've convinced ourselves we've plateaued when there are a lot of things to consider that determine whether or not an actual plateau has taken place.
Correct.
More often than not, complacency will kick in well before a plateau ever will. And that's mostly because as human beings, we're not very good at being objective with ourselves. As human beings, we're really, really, really good at convincing ourselves of things.
Those are a couple of things, and also too, when you're starting your weight or fat loss journey, you're really devoted and you're really
Hey, Kelly.
on track with everything, right? Like you
Yeah,
said,
complacency.
So as you go along, some of the really I would call them minor but key aspects to the fat loss journey that prevents you from plateauing get lost or forgotten about along the way.
Right. And the other thing is that, or maybe I should just start with.
Yeah,
just start right from. So I have some notes. If you see me looking down at my phone, that's why I made some notes. I don't want to forget anything that I want to touch on. So the first thing to remember is that there's a reason why we keep calories higher throughout the process, and why, from my perspective anyway, I know there are coaches out there that change calories on a weekly basis, that change them on a bi-weekly basis, that change them on a monthly basis. I'm not one of those coaches, and I do that for a reason. So over the years, I've learned that more often than not, consistency is the thing that goes out the window. Complacency happens first. If we keep our calories as high as possible through the process and work on improving all of the habits, and I'll go over what those habits are in a little while, chances are you're not going to plateau at your original calories for a long time. If done right, if you have all of the data, and if your habits, if you show up for the things that you're trying to do and how they align with your goals. If we don't start with a moderate deficit and we start too low, or we change calories too quickly through the process, especially if you have a considerable amount of weight to lose, you are going to get to an extremely low point, and the body will adapt to everything, but there are ways to navigate it so that it doesn't adapt so quickly. And if you start extremely low, or if you're lowering calories too quickly and you get to a point where you're at an extremely low calorie deficit already, there's literally nowhere else to put you. Now you can't decrease anymore. And if you plateau there, you have no other choice but do a reverse diet, which means then you have to bring your calories back up. You have to stay at that back up place for a while till your metabolism increases again, or till your body starts to react properly to that, and then go back into fat loss, which is an extremely long process. Extremely long.
Because that's what happened to you.
And it defeats the purpose. In one respect, it kind of defeats the purpose. Because had you just kept your calories high through the process, or moderately high, and maybe made certain tweaks, little tweaks along the way, or gave yourself what we classify as diet breaks or maintenance breaks along the way, or focused on all of the habits and, hey, could I do any of this better before I decrease calories, then you wouldn't be in that, you wouldn't get yourself to that situation. So that's why I don't do that and decrease my clients' calories, week after week after week, or bi-weekly or monthly. Everything goes based on the client's biofeedback. Everything goes, and what I mean by biofeedback are things like digestion, sleep, appetite, hunger, stress levels. Yeah, I know. I was just thinking if there's anything else. That's the main ones. And workout recovery is another really good one that needs to go in there. So the client's biofeedback, and this is why your check-in with your coach is so important. Your client's biofeedback tells you almost everything you need to know as a coach. Then, when you look at those things, and the biofeedback is telling you, things are tickety-boo and things are going along, even if the progress is slow, are there any habits that this client could be doing better? Is this client's consistency out in any of these things? If so, these are the things we need to work on improving before we just decrease calories. Because if we decrease calories, even only by a couple of hundred, let's just say, too soon, or before the client has adjusted to all the habits they need to have, now they not only have to adjust to a new deficit, but then they have to readjust all their habits as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because if you're, let's just use nutrition as the as the main, because that's the main driver of fat loss, you have your deficit and you have protein and fiber. Those are the main nutrition things that are the most important. So when you decrease calories, now your protein also changes. So now you have a whole new thing that you have to adjust to, whereas it's way better to stay at your moderate deficit for longer and play around with all the other things. Yeah. Make sure your consistency is intact. Make sure you have all the data that proves progress isn't happening. Make sure all your biofeedback is really good. Make sure your need activity is high, or as high as it could potentially be, that you literally can't do anything else to do it. I'm going to get there, Janine. And all of those things. So that's how you need to look at keeping your calories, not just this is what I'm going to say. The minute that the scale stops moving, you should not be panicking and going, oh my God, I need to decrease my calories.
Right. And the one thing that really entertains me, or I get a real good charge out of, is when you have a client and you give them their calorie target and it's way above what they're actually already at, and how shocked they are to find that that's the actual calorie target, or even like say somebody who's on, say, 1,300, they think they're on 1,300 calories, and you start them out at like 1,600, 1,800 calories, and they actually see movement. So right. it's really interesting.
Okay, so now we know that a moderate calorie deficit is the most important, that we don't just want to be looking and going and panicking and decreasing calories all the time, that we also know that as human beings, complacency will set in way before a plateau ever will. So if you know this, and you know that you want to aim to eat basically as much food through your process as possible while still seeing progress, and you're still looking at, nope, I'm definitely not progressing. So now you have to assess a couple of things. One, where is your assessment of your progress coming from? If it's only the scale, you need to obviously assess other stuff. You need to include the scale, you need to include progress pictures, and you need to include measurements. Those three things need to be all taken into consideration. You don't just go based off of your scale number. The second thing with progress, especially when it comes to the scale, is you have to have all of the accurate data. You cannot get on the scale on a Monday and then get on a following Monday and the following Monday and the following Monday and say, but Melissa, for those 4 Mondays, the scale was the same or it went up, and tell me that your progress is not happening, because that is not data that is reliable. You need data that is a scale weight measurement, a scale weigh-in every day, and I would actually go so far as to say every day for 30 days, and you need to be taking the average of those weekly and looking at your average numbers. The average number per week, not every week, but over time should be going down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so that's why I wouldn't bother dropping calories, because that's a whole lot of bullshit. Being on a scale every day for 30 days. I mean, it would work for me because I could build a spreadsheet.
So, first of all, you have to understand the scale and how it works. Your scale weight fluctuates. It will always fluctuate, and it will never stop fluctuating. So if you get on the scale on a Monday and you're 150 pounds, then you get on Tuesday and you're 149 pounds, and you get on Wednesday and you're 148, and then you get on Thursday and you're 152. That doesn't mean you gain fat. That means that you have extra water in your body, or less water in your body, or whatever the process might be. And you need to have you need to have the accurate data before you can ever say you've plateaued. And you need to have all of the data, which means you need to include measurements, like I said, you need to have progress pictures, and you need to have scale weights, but you need to have more than one random day of the week as your scale weight number that you're going by.
Yeah. Because I mean, you can even take my own personal journey, for example. Like, my scale weight hasn't changed by a whole lot, but my body composition is completely different.
Right.
Compared to a year ago.
Same thing with what I talked about last week with the 125 pounds. We talked about that in last week's coffee time. You can look completely different, and your scale weight might not change that much. But if you just take the data that I just said, and you had 150, 149, 148, 152, even that, those 4 days tell you that you've actually seen changes that week, because you saw some new lows. You saw 148 and you saw 149. So if you're going to average out your week is still going to be lower than it probably was the week before. Yeah. So you need all of the data. In addition to that data, you need to be able to prove, if you don't have a coach, to prove to yourself, but if you do have a coach, to prove to your coach that you've been consistent for at least 30 days. And that means that you're consistently hitting your deficit for sure, 100%, at least 6 out of 30 days is 80% consistency.
6 out of 30 is 80?
Sorry, 24 out of 30 means you can only have 6 days where you've not met your deficit. Okay? So that means to have 80% consistency, you can only have X's on your 30-day calendar for six times. In addition to that, when you look at that, and let's just say that now has taken place, and you have all your data, and now you still show that you haven't made progress in over a 4-week period. Your scale weight shows the same, your pictures haven't changed, your measurements haven't changed, and you are being consistent with your deficit for 30 days, or for say 24 days out of 30 as a minimum. Now we need to assess, before we still make a change to your deficit, hey Crystalline, we need to assess, how are you doing with protein? Could you improve it? How are you doing with fiber? Could you improve it? How often do you move throughout the day? If you don't have accurate data for steps and you don't track steps, that's fine, but could you improve your daily non-exercise movement? How often do you show up for your workouts? If you're doing 3 workouts a week, how often do you skip a workout through the week? Do you do all 3? Out of 30 days, are you hitting 12 workouts a week if you're doing 3 workouts a week, as an example? Does that make sense? 3, 6, 9, 12 will be 12 workouts.
Yeah, but you said 12 workouts a week if you're doing
12 workouts a month if you're doing 3 workouts a week. How is your sleep? Could you prioritize it and make it better? Are you getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night most nights? And then the next thing to assess is stress management. I do not move a client's calories at all unless all of that is in place and all of it is good. If a client is hitting their deficit but still not seeing progress, and we have all of the progress indicators, which honestly is very rare. When we do all of the data and we take all of the data and we look at it all and we assess it all, the majority of the time, clients are not as consistent as they believe they are. When you have all the data in front of you, the data proves otherwise almost every single time. However, there are cases where the data does show that, this client is consistent with the deficit. This client is consistent with, the progress indicators. None of them are moving that much or at all. Then we look at, as I said, those other things. So now we need to look at, I don't move a client's calories at all if their protein isn't being hit consistently, or if they could do it all to improve it, their fiber, all of those things that I just listed. The only time I move a client's calories is when all of that is in place really well. Everything is consistent. We have all of the data that proves progress is literally not happening. And even when I do it and decrease it, it is very minimal. It is by most often it's by 2, maximum 300 calories. So if they're at, say, 1,800 calories, they would go to 15, but it would be a gradual process. So I might put somebody on something that's, and this is getting a little bit more technical than we need to here, but I might put somebody then on calorie cycling, where they do still some days at 18, but they do a few other days at 15. It still decreases their weekly calories, but doesn't give such a huge drop.
So basically what all this tells you is that a fat loss journey isn't just something as simple as, okay, well, I'm not going to eat this week, or I'm going to, run on a treadmill for 2 hours a day every day for a week, or I'm going to work out the 3 days a month, the 3 days a week for a total of 12 days a month. Like, there are so many aspects that it's almost like all the stars have to align and everything has to be perfect in order for proper fat loss to happen. So when you, like you say, when you derail any one of those pieces, you remove any one of those pieces from the puzzle, then the fat loss journey or the fat loss process is going to take longer.
Exactly. The only time that to be honest, when my clients are at a place that I just said, where everything is really consistent, we have the proof that everything's consistent, progress is still not happening, my first initial instinct, unless they're in a really good place calorie-wise, is to give them a diet break first.
Yeah.
And what a diet break means, for those of you who don't know, is you go into maintenance for a time. And it might only be a week. It might be 2 weeks, it might be 3 weeks, it might be 4 weeks, depending on the person and depending on the lifestyle and depending on the situation. And what that does is it gives your metabolism a break from fat loss calories.
Yeah.
So when you move the client out of fat loss, out of a deficit, and into what we classify as a maintenance break or a diet break, now all of a sudden your body is getting more food. It's kind of like, and some people call them a refeed. If they're only short periods of time, some people call them a refeed. And then when you go back into fat loss, you actually don't have to decrease your calories at all. You get to stay at the same calories, and then progress will kick in again because you've had a break from. So you've given, instead of allowing just staying where you're at and just struggling through or decreasing more, we look at increasing calories for a time so that the body has extra food coming in. It has less stress because a deficit automatically creates stress on the body. And then we go back into the same calories. So I have a really good example. So I have a client who's been with me for nearly 3 years. She's down nearly 90 pounds. And 90 pounds? Did she just hit 100 pounds? I can't remember, but she's in between, like 80 to 100 pounds lost. Her and I have only changed her deficit once, and the one time was just this year. Actually, sorry, it was just before Christmas last year. We took her from 2,200 calories down to 2,000. So for a year and a half-ish, almost 2 years, she was at 2,200 calories, had lost 80 pounds at 2,200 calories, or 85 pounds at 2,200 calories. She's had numerous maintenance breaks through her process. And then just before Christmas last year, we put her at 2,000, maybe 1950, I can't remember now. And now again, she's progressing again, and now she's hit, I think, if I'm not mistaken, now she's at 100 pounds lost-ish. And where she's at with her current weight right now, like with all of her current stats, where she's at with her deficit is an extremely good place to be, and her metabolism has remained like in a good place, because you can see by a client's biofeedback how their metabolism is reacting. So this is all like a little bit more sciencey than maybe I expected to get into here, but
I just want to bring it back around to understanding that this is why you try to teach it as a lifestyle change. Because there is a lot of science and a lot of geekiness and nerdiness and stuff behind it. There's a lot of different aspects.
I am very geeky when it comes to this.
Yeah, but there are so many different aspects that you have to be in control of in order to be successful.
And so people are
so when you turn them into habits and when you turn them into a lifestyle, then it's much easier to have progress. But when you take it from the approach where you're just looking at it as just a scale weight or a calorie number or the amount of workouts that you do in a week, or each of those individual little items, it makes the fat loss process very complex.
The fat loss process,
and it can be very defeating.
So the fat loss process itself, like, it's simple, but the way that you need to navigate it can be very complex. Like, if you want to navigate it properly, where it's not just because at the end of the day, fat loss is about calories in versus calories out. You need to have a calorie deficit to create fat loss. End of story. Mm-hmm. But in addition to the deficit, it can't just be slash calories. People are too quick to do that, including a lot of coaches. Too quick to do that because all they want to do is have their clients see the results that they're after. But we have to look at protecting the metabolism, the mental and physical health as we go through the process. Can you tell I'm passionate again now?
Yeah, but you also have to protect the nutritional value of what they eat.
That's what I'm saying. Like, there's a lot more. Fat loss is about calories, but there's a lot more to consider. Like, if you can improve one single thing nutritionally or habit-wise, there's zero need to decrease your calories. Zero.
Exactly. That was my point.
I know, because the total daily energy expenditure is determined by numerous things, not just calories, even though that's the biggest one. You have non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is basically non-exercise activity. You have thermic effect of feeding, which influences how your body burns calories when it's through the digestion process. So like more protein, more fiber, those things will help you burn more calories through your digestion process than, I don't know, a donut as an example. Not that there's anything wrong with a donut. Then you have exercise activity thermogenesis, which is your workouts. That all is influenced, is part of your TDEE. Then you have your basal metabolic rate, which is predetermined. This is how many calories you burn just being you and doing SFA all day long, basically. So then the more you move, like this or whatever, that helps you burn calories. Your NEAT activity has a tremendous effect and a tremendous amount of influence on how many calories you burn on a daily basis. The more protein you eat, the more fiber you consume. That has a tremendous, although not grand effect, it has more of an effect on your daily calorie burn than your actual exercise activity, which is your workouts, do. Your workouts only make up about 5% of your total daily energy expenditure. So there's that. So people are extremely quick, and that's because we don't want to take the onus, to be honest. Let's face it. We don't want to accept the fact that it's us that's holding ourselves back. We would rather blame something else. So instead of looking at all the data and analyzing it, and this is where it pays to have a coach, because somebody like me will always ask my clients, well, if I look at the data, it shows you haven't been consistent with your calorie deficit, though, for the last 30 days. If I look at the data, it shows me I had programmed for you 12 workouts for the month, but you've only showed up for 5. If I look at the data, it shows me that you're not, majority of the time hitting a protein target or hitting the minimum protein or hitting the minimum fiber. Or I know based on your check-ins that your biofeedback in terms of energy, appetite, hunger, sleep, stress management is all kind of wonky, and we need to work to improve that before we could ever decrease your calories. All of that needs to be considered.
Yeah.
Now, if we take Janine's question, and Janine's question is, so how do you know when to decrease? The answer to that is you have to have every bit of data, and you need to analyze it and be honest with yourself. That would be my direct answer. If you have the data and you know that, and you're not lying to yourself, you have the data, you know that for a minimum of 30 days, if you look at a sheet that says calories, protein, fiber, workouts, NEAT activity, whatever, and you have scale measurements and pictures, nothing's changed, and you have all the data that tells you that, yep, I've been consistent with all of that across the board at least 80% of the time, that's when you know you need to decrease. But you have to give it a minimum of 30 days, and you have to have all of the data. I cannot stress this enough. You cannot just go based off your scale number. Don't do it to yourself, because fat loss and weight loss are two totally different things. And if you are stressed out, if you're not sleeping, if your biofeedback is off, your scale weight is also going to be off or up or fluctuate a tremendous amount more than probably it even normally does. And you need to take that all into consideration. Yeah?
Yeah.
What else? Does anybody have any questions? So my notes were calories as high as possible throughout your process. Don't just slash calories for the sake of slashing calories. My second note was that complacency sets in way before a plateau ever will. My third note was that you need to assess more than just the scale. You need to assess all of the progress indicators. Third note is that all habits and biofeedback need to be considered, which is all the things I just listed. The fourth note was that you have to be at least and have proof that you've been at least 80% consistent. And then the last note is to make sure across the board you have all of the data considered. And even then, as I said, you can assess and you can be honest with yourself and you can say, yeah, I was 100% am and things are not taking place. I would not change my calories any more than 300 calories as a max. Most times when I change clients' calories, it's usually by only 200, and it still kickstarts the process. And then you'll have the option. You could decrease calories by 200 if you're in a good place to do so, or you could go into a maintenance break, which would be about 200 to 300 calories more than what you're consuming right now. Give yourself a break for 3 to 4 weeks, and then go back into the same calories you were in before, and that would probably kickstart it, and it's way better for your metabolism to do it that way.
Yeah, because if you think about dropping your calories, and so when you're dropping your calories, it's more than just dropping calories. Now you got to go through every aspect of your eating routine. So your protein needs to change, your carbohydrates need to change. All that you need to look then and see how much of each that you're consuming, and if you're going to reduce it, well, then you got to reduce that as well. And it's been funny because we've had clients where they've asked to have their calories reduced when they couldn't even hit the targets.
So this is the other point I was going to bring up, and I forgot about this. And then it's a good thing you brought it up. Do you want to talk about it?
No, well, you go ahead. I can only
speak
to it, not of it.
Let's just say you're at 1,800 calories. Let's say that as an example. And you're adamant that you're not making progress. But I know for a fact that you are not consistent at 1,800 calories, but you have yourself convinced that you are. Think about this for a second. When you ask, or when you decide on your own, whatever, that you're going to decrease calories even though you're not hitting your current calories, because a lot of people think, all I need to do is go harder. I need to go more hardcore. So I'm going to decrease. So if I'm at 18, I'm going to decrease to 15 because that'll be better for me. If you aren't consistent at 1,800, there is almost zero chance you are going to be consistent at 15. Less food is not going to help you with a consistency problem. Just like more workouts is not going to help you with a consistency issue. Right. Your issue needs to be doing the fucking work at what you've been given.
But I mean, the other thing you got to consider is if you're going to reduce the calories and reduce the amount of food that you're intaking, you don't have the available calories to burn. If you're reducing your calories to the point where they're not sustaining you.
If you're not meeting, see, this here is where it gets to be even more sciencey, because if you come to me as a client and you tell me that you're only consuming 1,000 to 1,200 calories and you're not losing fat, I already know without even telling you what's going on. Most of the time. Not always, but most of the time. And most of the time what's going on is that you think you're eating 1,000 to 1,200 calories a day, or you are consuming 1,000 to 1,200 calories a day some days of the week, but on the other days and through the other times, you are over-consuming immensely, and you're not considering that, which means that when somebody comes to me like that, I automatically put them at no less than 1,500 calories, and guess what happens? They see fat loss because they have a higher deficit to achieve, which then gives them more food to consume and more of an ability to be consistent. Trust me when I tell you that if you aren't able to be consistent at a higher calorie number, you will definitely not make it at a lower calorie number. All the lower calorie number is doing for you is driven by fear, number one. Yeah. It's driven by the fact that you think you need to be more hardcore and that's going to fix things. And three, you think that your way of justifying things is that something new, the novelty is going to help you. And it never works. Just the same as I have clients who are not consistent at all, even at 3 workouts a week, and now they want to go to 4. And they want to go to 4 because they're grasping at straws as to how, why.
They figure you're gonna burn more calories.
And they figure something new is going to fix their consistency, but that never works. No. Adding more to your plate or taking away more calories it never works.
No, because again, you're adding to the complexity.
The maintenance calories don't affect your fiber intake. 25 to 30 grams of fiber is the minimum requirement, or is the requirement as a woman. 38 grams of fiber is the requirement as a man. So changing into maintenance calories doesn't affect your fiber intake. Technically speaking, 100 grams of protein is the minimum amount of protein you want to be consuming, regardless of whether you're in fat loss or whether you're in maintenance or whether whatever the case may be. Technically speaking, your protein is dictated by how many calories you consume. That's how you determine your protein target. I don't do protein targets for my 6-week program. I'm helping my clients simply build better habits. I give them, hey, you should be aiming to consume at least 100 grams of protein. You should be aiming to consume 25 grams of fiber, and you should be hitting your calorie deficit.
But that's
when my clients move into longer-term coaching with me, that's when I give people their determined protein target. How it's determined depends on how many calories you are actually at.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say earlier, is that you got to, before you can go into all this fat loss journey business, you got to build the habits first.
Yeah, like you should be having, basically, regardless of which part of a journey you're on, whether it's maintenance or maintenance or fat loss, you should be consuming protein with every meal. You should be consuming a minimum of 100 grams of protein a day, up to, I would say for most people, 120 to 150 grams. And
because once you build all the habits,
the fiber doesn't change. It never changes. The fiber is the same.
Right. Because once you build all the habits first, then the consistency is much easier to do.
Yes,
it's not guaranteed, but
once you work through your processes and build the mindsets around building consistency and self-discipline, then everything becomes easier, I will say.
Yeah, well, because then you're not looking for, because when you're doing all the right things, then you're not looking for, reducing calories or reducing this or reducing that or changing something, because all the processes are in place.
Say it again.
I said, when you've got all the processes in place and you're doing them consistently and seeing the results, well, then you're not trying to look for the next best thing.
If you're seeing results, you never need to look for the next best thing because you're seeing results.
But you've had issues where people are seeing results, but they're not seeing the results the way they think that they should be seeing the results and want the changes. Yes,
that's true. But then you just have to work on your mindset in those cases, because most people's mindset is that fat loss is a quick process, and how come I only lost a pound or 2 pounds in 3 weeks or 4 weeks? Because that's the way it goes. And the longer you're on your journey, the slower your progress will be.
Right, and that's just another thing to add to, like, a false plateau.
Right. Yes, that's right. People also look at slower progress as a plateau. Any progress at all it means you haven't hit a plateau. Any progress. Yes, Janine, exactly. At the end of the day, it's called follow the program and be consistent in all aspects, and don't be fighting with yourself, telling yourself you've plateaued if you don't have all the data.
Yeah.
The data is a requirement to be able to say, oh, yeah, I have plateaued. Now I need to decrease my calories by a couple of hundred.
Right. The biggest thing is people don't ever give themselves enough time.
No, the biggest thing, honestly, no matter how much weight you have to lose or you want to lose, a good year is what you need. Yeah. No matter if it's 20 pounds or if it's 60 pounds or if it's 100 pounds, you should at least be giving yourself a year, because a year allows you to adopt the habits, adopt the mindsets, adopt the behaviors that lead to sustainability with said progress as you go along. Because you can speed it up. You can easily speed it up. But if you speed it up and you haven't developed the habits, behaviors, and mindsets, you aren't going to maintain it.
You can't keep it, yeah.
So it makes no sense to speed it up.
Well, that, and the other thing, too, that people forget is that however old they are, it took them that long to get where they are in the first place.
Yes.
So it's not going to change.
However long you've been on diets, that's how long it's taken you to get where you are.
Yeah.
So that needs to be considered. All your mindsets and stuff don't change in a matter of months or weeks. It takes time. And your body composition can still change in maintenance if you're doing things like, prioritizing your strength training and prioritizing general movement. Your body composition doesn't mean your scale weight, but your body composition itself can change even in maintenance, with eating maintenance calories. I mean, it takes longer to see, and it's a longer process if you're looking for if you're doing it just for progress. But your body composition can truly change eating maintenance calories too.
Yeah. And the biggest thing too is trying to teach people, like typically when somebody comes to you, it's like, well, they have this goal. They want to lose this amount of weight or blah 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 blah, and to try and teach them that, okay, yes, you can achieve that, but this is how long it takes to achieve. This is what you got to do. The biggest question isn't, okay, well, can I do this? The biggest question is, what are you going to do after you do?
Yes. The biggest question, the biggest issue with, and I've said this, I've made this statement numerous times. As a society, we don't have a weight loss issue. It's not a weight loss issue that we have. It's a maintenance issue. Everybody can lose weight because there's so many fads and so many easy ways, not easy technically in terms of that they're not hard, but there's loads of quick fixes out there that will definitely make your scale weight go down. But we don't have a weight loss issue as a society. We have a maintenance issue. Our issue is maintaining said weight loss once we achieve it. That's what you're saying, right?
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
And people don't think about that step. They just want to go, well, I want a smaller belly. I want to weigh this, and if and like you say, they can do all the quick fixes, things like that, and they get themselves there. But this is what I've been saying from the start of this conversation, is that if you don't build the habits that are required to get you to that point, you're not going to have the habits that will enable you to go into maintenance once you get there.
Right, and that's exactly it. The body is an extremely intricate thing. It's fascinating to me.
Well, it is. It's an ecosystem, and it's interesting how you can just change and tweak this, that, or the other. You don't even have to change a whole bunch of things. You can just change, well, like you say, just changing one little thing, like the amount of calories, and just see the impact that has.
That, and it's amazing to me that, because I never used to believe these things either. So I get it when you're like, Sharmoza or whatever you're doing over there on the other end of the screen. But like, when you give your body more sleep, for instance, it reacts in a way that is almost unexpected, because you don't well, I do, because I love my sleep, but most people don't believe that sleep plays a big role. But sleep in a fat loss journey specifically is almost sometimes more important than a workout. It can be, depending on whatever else is going on. The same thing with stress management. Stress management is huge, because when the body is stressed, the body will react to things, and your biofeedback will show weird, wonky things. So there's a lot, like, the body is fascinating. The way, the little things that you can do, like for instance with the diet breaks. Like, you would never consider that, for instance, you could be on the same calories for, say, 3 months at a time, and then go into a slight diet break of, like, say, maybe 4 weeks or 3 weeks, and then that would be enough so that you don't have to decrease calories again. And that if you're just patient enough and don't just look at your scale number, and you look at all the other things, and you learn to understand what your scale weight looks like and how it fluctuates, then you're less likely, if you're open-minded to it all, you're less likely to panic and go bonkers and start changing everything. And then all of a sudden you're at, say, 1,200 calories, and you're going, oh, but I'm not seeing progress at 1,200 calories. But that's because now you can't be consistent at 1,200 calories.
Right.
Most of the time, that's what happens.
Right, because you more often than not go well above 1,200 calories.
And I know for me personally, like, way before I knew any of the stuff that I know now, or did any of the education, I used to think that, my energy levels and my sleep patterns and my stress management and my appetite and my hunger, that was all unrelated. But all of that biofeedback tells you things about what's going on with your body, how your body's reacting to your deficit, how you, if you are not in a good place, your workout recovery, all of that tells you things. That's important. Yeah. They're important things.
Yeah.
The body reacts in amazing yet complicated ways.
Yeah.
Or it can.
I think the next topic is the quick fix, isn't it?
No, the next topic Next week's topic we're going to talk about, because I get this question a lot. So I'm going to dive into it in detail, which is why I don't just tell clients what to do.
Yeah, but that's the quick fix.
When to do it, how to do it, what you should eat, at what time, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
So why I don't do meal plans, basically.
Yeah.
That's the topic we're going to go over next week.
Yeah.
Because I get this question. I've gotten this question just this past week alone already, and we're only at Tuesday.
Well, that's...
Since Saturday, I think I've gotten that question 4 times already.
Yeah, getting the question, but also getting a lot of requests for meal plans too.
Well, when I say got the question, that's what I mean. People will message me and they'll say, "Hey, do you do meal plans?" And then I reply with, "No, I don't, and why?" So yeah. So that's all we have for today. We have to close off because I have a client call at 4 o'clock.
Yeah. I think we touched on everything that we needed to about this. I mean,
it can be a complex topic. Like a lot more needs to be considered than just, I'm sure I plateaued kind of thing.
Yeah.
But we've covered it all. So yeah, if you have any questions, you know how to reach us.
Yeah. The biggest thing about the thing I want to close with this whole plateau idea is that we don't want to admit to ourselves that we're not being consistent.
No, that's what I mean.
You said that earlier, where
we're terrible at putting the onus on ourselves, but we're really, really great at blaming our hormones or the fact that our body has plateaued on us or whatever the case might be.
Yeah.
But we're terrible at admitting that we're just not being consistent.
Yeah. And unfortunately...
And don't get me wrong, when I say that, I've been there, so I know that this is the case.
Yeah.
I see it all the time with clients, but I've done it myself.
Yeah. It's unfortunate that's basically what diet culture has taught us, though. That if this doesn't work, well then this is what you got to do.
Yes.
Because everybody is selling you the quickest way to lose fat.
That, and it's easy to look down the street at your neighbor or at your friend, whatever, and they've lost 20 pounds because they're doing some sort of quick fix. And then it's hard not to compare yourself to that when your progress is taking way longer, even though the process you're in may be way better for you physically and mentally. And longer term. Maintenance, remember, is the issue, not weight loss. Okay, that's all we have for this week. Yeah. We will be back next week. Same time, same place. Okay.
Not Mexico.
Not Mexico. Anyways, have a good night, ladies.